Welcome to Know. I'm Ashley Jenkins.
I'm Meg Turney.
Former California state senator and anti-video games legislator Leland Yee was sentenced to prison today for what else? Political corruption, gun trafficking, and racketeering, which, hey, sort of makes him sound like, well, a video game villain.
I like you said what else, but then it was like gun trafficking was in there.
Parking tickets, gun trafficking, the usual.
Not. Anyway, the judge sentenced the former senator to 5 years in prison, or whenever Half-Life 3 comes out.
So life. You might remember Yee from a number of ridiculous sound bites, usually linking video games to real-world violence.
He tried to blame the 2012 Sandy Hook shootings on video games, for instance. Real nice guy. Speaking to the San Francisco Chronicle after the tragic shootings, Yee drew gamers into the gun violence debate, saying gamers have got to just quiet down. Gamers have no credibility in this argument. This is all about their lust for violence and the industry's lust for money.
Feeling some irony here, Yee.
Yeah.
Yee was also the legislator who was primarily behind the video game violence law that went all the way up to the Supreme Court back in 2005. He authored the bill that essentially banned the sale of all ultra-violent video games in the state of California.
Now, that law ultimately ended in 2011, and the Supreme Court struck it down as unconstitutional in a 7-2 vote. Incidentally, that was the same landmark case for the video game industry, which basically meant the government acknowledged video games as art for the very first time.
So I guess maybe we can thank Yee for getting the Supreme Court to give video games the same legal protection as other forms. Thanks, Yee, fighting the good fight!
Reacting to that ruling, of course, Yee said, "Unfortunately, the majority of the Supreme Court once again put the interests of corporate America before the interests of our children."
Let someone think of the children!
It is simply wrong that the video game industry can be allowed to put their profit margins over the rights of parents and the well-being of children.
And then he tried to traffic a bunch of high-powered automatic rifles from overseas. Seriously, which leads us back to what happened today, sort of.
He's basically Sons of Anarchy, IRL. Alright, so we have to go back just a little bit first to fill you in on some details. Last year, Yee pleaded guilty to racketeering charges that he was selling his votes to the highest bidder. This came after his arrest back in 2014 following a multi-year sting by undercover FBI agents.
The agents handed Yee literal bags of cash in exchange for his political influence, posing as businessmen, the mafia, and probably even Ganondorf at one point, just to see if he'd keep falling for it.
It's amazing. There's a legal way to trade money for votes, bro. It's called lobbyism.
In all, it's said that Yee accepted over $100,000 in bribes, plus he also tried to strike a deal to give the undercover agents high-powered weaponry from the Philippines, which is especially bonkers when you take his anti-violence legislation into account. Some of that legal battle definitely would have coincided with the FBI's investigation into Yee.
I love he's like, "Hey, you bought my votes. You want some guns? We got some guns back here.
They're on sale.
NVD.
Throw some in. Give it a good deal."
Yeah, he should have just made a video game about this whole thing and said that video games made him do it, really.
Gun trafficking simulator.
If only. Although that probably, of course, wouldn't have helped him today during his sentencing. Apparently, both the judge and the prosecution were pretty ruthless with the former senator, declaring that he was willing to betray the trust of those who elected him and abuse that trust in the worst possible way.
Yee, of course, isn't the first video game opponent to run afoul of the law. Outspoken video game critic Thompson, who we all remember and love, was permanently disbarred by the Florida Supreme Court back in 2008 after a long list of odd filings and inappropriate conduct.
Thompson had a beef with violent media in general, mostly focusing his Sith Lord hatred on video games. He often tried to interpret high-profile court cases where the defendant had played or owned violent video games, arguing that the effects of video games on young minds provided some defense for their actions.
And he was from the South.
Yes.
Which usually meant video game developers were to blame instead. Of course, in 1997, he filed a lawsuit on behalf of the parents of a high school student who killed 3 of his classmates. The suit took aim at the makers of Doom, Quake, Resident Evil, and, oddly enough, the Basketball Diaries, to the tune of $33 million.
Most famously, Thompson went after Grand Theft Auto, calling it the greatest assault on children since, quote, polio. Not to mention all that darn rap music.
No, actually rap music. He sued rap music all the time. In 2003, he named Take-Two and Sony in a $246 million lawsuit after 2 teens charged with homicide told police they'd played the game. In that suit, he alleged that the makers of Grand Theft Auto 3 should have known that their game would cause copycat violence. The lawsuit was thrown out pretty quickly.
Proving that we can sometimes have nice things. Really, most legislation about video games seems to meet the same fate, despite legislators and activists trying to claim that video games are responsible for real-world violence, and of course should be banned. But as with most things, it seems like money and greed were the cause for Ye's ultimate downfall, not video games.
Yeah, Thompson's too. He
Yeah.
eventually settled with Take-Two when they filed a lawsuit against him. Surprise, surprise, turnabout's fair play, to get him to stop filing more lawsuits against them. It's really confusing, but honestly, he might have just been looking for a payday all along.
And just because both of these guys have stopped, it doesn't mean that we won't hear more about, legislators bringing stuff against video games.
Yeah. But hey, it's good to know we don't have to deal with these ones anymore. Enjoy the bars, Ye. Blame the video games that made you do it.
So what do you guys think about these lawmakers who blame video games for everything under the sun? Let us know in the comments down below.
And of course, for all your updates on lawyers and Sith, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the Now.
I like every time you say thanks ye or thank ye, it sounds like you're just saying ye only English.
Thank ye.
I thank ye. All right. Is
Jerk.
it where there's a Sith, there's dead little ones?
No, I just thought like there's always two Siths, right? There's like a Master Sith. Help me out here, Stab.
Two.
There's always
The
two.
rule of
the rule of
two.
two.
Master and apprentice.
Master and
Yeah.
apprentice. Okay, so if the master dies, doesn't the apprentice then become the master and get his own apprentice?
I think it's where there's a master, there's a dead young one. I'm just saying, rule of two.
All those younglings.
Or 10 dead younglings.
younglings.
You are the chosen one!
How did we do? Is that a good impression?
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, look.
Better than Hayden Christian.
I was gonna say we did better than he
And his
did.
name is Christensen, sir. I would
No one.
expect you to get it right.
No one's gonna bother remembering his name.